The dog's bare flesh told a story John never knew. 12 years. 12 years of dense German shepherd fur, hiding what now lay bare under the Texas sun. A faded military tattoo numbers seared into his flesh, partly covered by fresh razor nicks, still weeping blood. K94721 JSOC. John's hand shook, wrapping his jacket around Max's shivering frame. His daughter sobbed beside him, wrists raw from the ropes. The laughter of the boys responsible still echoed down the empty road. But John wasn't hearing them anymore. He was reading the digits again. Joint Special Operations Command. The kind of designation that doesn't appear on random shelter dogs. The kind that confirmed Max wasn't just a companion. Max was a phantom. On the ground, nearly buried in dust, was a dog tag John had never seen before. He picked it up, turned it over, and everything he believed he knew was suddenly shattered. 150 words. Before we continue, please show your support and let me know which city you're watching from. Now let us return to the story. 6 hours earlier, the morning had started with scrambled eggs and a comfortable silence. The comfortable kind born from years of knowing words weren't needed. John scraped the skillet completely clean, dividing the last of the cheese between Emily's plate and Max's bowl. The kitchen smelled of Maxwell House and worn linoleum. Sunlight illuminated dust motes that danced serenely above the table. Max sat faithfully beside Emily's chair, his graying muzzle resting on her knee, patient, always so patient. At 12 years, his dark fur was now silver around the eyes, his gait slower from hips that ached on cold mornings, but his eyes, those profound brown eyes, still held the sharp alertness of a younger dog. Emily slipped him bacon when she figured John wasn't looking. John pretended not to see. He let her have this tiny act of defiance. On the counter, an envelope glared. Vet bill, $340. Stamped past due in merciless red. John's VA check just covered rent and food. The old truck's transmission was shot, so walking was their only option now. His right leg would start to drag whenever exhaustion set in. The old injury from Helmand province made itself known with each step. But they managed. They always managed. "You ready, sweetheart?" John asked. His voice a gravelly rasp, strained from silence. Emily nodded, hoisting the backpack onto her shoulders. She was 10 now, too old to be holding hands. But her small fingers sought his anyway as they stepped out onto the porch. The oppressive September heat descended upon them instantly. Texas had no mercy for those hoping for a gentle autumn. Max followed his claws, ticking on the weathered steps, moving with the solemn dignity of age. The walk into town stretched 1.2 miles. John counted his own footsteps, a desperate rhythm to block out the fire in his leg. Emily chattered about school, a story about her teacher, Mrs. Chen's new puppy, and John clung to every word with the intense focus he once gave to mission briefings. Each syllable was precious when only one person in the whole world still called you Dad. Max stopped dead halfway down Oakwood Road, his nose lifting to the air, his ears swiveling forward like antennae. Something was deeply wrong. John's hand came to rest on Emily's shoulder. Primal instincts never fade away. Not even when you're just walking to the pharmacy for medication you can't afford. "Keep walking," he murmured, his voice low. The stop at the pharmacy was swift. Mrs. Rosa, the pharmacist, was 62, with compassionate eyes and a smoker's gravelly tone. She carefully counted John's exact change for the VA prescription, and then silently added a bottle of Advil. "For the leg, John." He gave a slight nod. He didn't say thank you. His pride wouldn't let him, but his eyes conveyed the gratitude his mouth could not. Emily pointed to the dog biscuits near the cash register. "Dad, can Max have a treat? $4.99. It might as well have been $499. "Not this week, baby." She didn't cry. She had learned not to. The walk back cut through the forgotten park, a graveyard of rusted swings and a court with more deep cracks than actual concrete. It was a shortcut that spared John's leg another quarter mile of punishment. Cicadas buzzed in the haze, the sound almost a hypnotic drone. Then came the roar of engines. 3 lifted trucks, their chrome gleaming menacingly. The kind of vehicles that cost more than John made in a full year. Max's ears pinned flat against his head. He moved in front of Emily without a command. 70 pounds of aging muscle became a shield between threat and child. The trucks fanned out into a loose semicircle, blocking their only path forward. 6 young men spilled out onto the asphalt. Early 20s clad in designer sunglasses and shoes that cost more than John's monthly food budget. The leader, tall and arrogant, wore a smirk of pure entitlement. John recognized him with a sickening lurch. Cody Brennan, the sheriff's son, the kind of boy who'd never been denied anything in his life. "If you'll excuse us." John's voice was steady, even. Not a trace of fear, not a hint of aggression, just a man asking to get by. Then Cody's eyes fell upon Max. "That is one ugly mutt, and the old man looks like he's got one foot in the grave." A deep vibration rumbled in Max's chest, a warning more profound than any growl. John's hand came to rest on the dog's head, a calming, steadying presence. "We don't want any trouble," John stated, his voice low and quiet. Cody's companion pulled out a phone, its camera already recording. "Bro, this is about to go viral." John carefully guided Emily around them. Max limped. Yet he remained a loyal shield between the men and the girl, his dignity unyielding in the face of their taunts. Their cruel laughter echoed down the road, chasing them. Emily dared to look back, her face burning with a shame that wasn't hers. John never turned. His jaw was a line of granite, his hands clenched into tight fists, but he continued to walk away. Some men walk away from a fight because they are afraid. John walked away because his soul had already seen enough war. Behind them, the silence was shattered by the roar of engines. The 3 trucks began to creep forward, following them with menacing intent. The sheriff's office smelled of burnt coffee and old leather. Fluorescent lights buzzed relentlessly overhead, casting the entire room in a sickening yellow-tinged gloom. John stood at the counter, Emily close by his side, her hands clutching a manila folder that held the heavy burden of their truth. Sheriff Brennan didn't bother to stand when they came in. He was 55 years old, with a paunch that hung over his belt and a badge polished to an aggressive shine. He simply leaned back in his chair, fingers laced over his stomach, and offered a hollow smile. "What can I do for you today, John?" John placed the folder on the scarred wooden desk. Inside were the printed screenshots from the live stream and Max's veterinary report, detailing the subsequent infections, the cuts, the grimly accelerated cancer timeline, everything documented, everything irrefutably true. "I am here to file a report. Assault, animal cruelty, and the destruction of property." Brennan began to flip through the pages with a performance of utter disinterest. He stopped at one screenshot. His own son's face perfectly visible, holding a pair of electric clippers and grinning shamelessly at the camera. "I don't see any kind of evidence in here," he said smoothly. "Just looks like an old dog that got himself a bad haircut." John's voice remained unshakably calm. "There is a video. Your son posted it online." "My son was right here at home all day Saturday," Brennan lied, closing the folder with a sharp finality. He pushed it back across the desk. "Are you calling my boy a liar?" Emily's hand sought out John's. He squeezed it gently. "I have witnesses. I have medical documentation. I have—" "You have nothing," Brennan interrupted, rising to his feet now, all 6 feet of him, a wall built to intimidate. "You know what I see, John, a bitter old man desperate for the spotlight. Your dog is ailing. It's a tragedy, truly, but it's certainly not my burden." An invisible wall stood between them, a barrier of sheer power. Brennan leaned in closer, his voice a low, almost gentle hiss. "You're an intelligent man, a decorated hero and all that. Why can't you just let this fade away? Things could become difficult for you and that little girl of yours." John felt Emily flinch beside him. He grabbed the folder. "I'll be back with legal counsel." Brennan's cruel laughter echoed behind them. "Good luck finding any in this town." The attorney's office was a cramped space, hidden above the hardware store. Attorney Mills was 48, with eyes full of defeat, and a handshake that offered an apology before he even spoke. "John, believe me, I wish I could help." He pushed the folder aside unread. "But Sheriff Brennan, he practically owns this town, and what he doesn't own he has in his debt. So the truth is irrelevant." Mills wearily rubbed his face. "I have a daughter in college. Her tuition is due in 3 weeks. I cannot afford his wrath." John rose not with anger or pleading, but with solemn understanding. "I get it." He left his card on the desk. A chill was in the air when John entered the pharmacy on Wednesday. Mrs. Rosa's unease was palpable. She processed his prescription, her gaze fixed on the counter, her familiar kindness replaced by a raw, naked fear. "John," she whispered, darting a nervous look toward the back room. "Whispers are going around that you're stirring things up. I am only seeking what's just. My husband," she faltered, swallowing hard. "He thinks it's best if you take your business elsewhere." The days of friendly gestures were gone. John paid with exact change and departed. Thursday delivered a call from Emily's school. She had been in an altercation. A dark bruise was already blossoming on her cheek when John reached the principal's office. Another student taunted that her dog deserved its fate. Principal Hayes relayed the events, his voice a practiced, empty monotone. Emily initiated the physical contact. "He started it, Dad." Emily's voice was defiant, a brave front against the tears carving paths through the discolored skin on her cheek. John looked at the principal, then at the other child, suspended for a single day. "Emily receives 3 because she fought back, because she must learn that actions have consequences." John took Emily's small hand in his. "Oh, she already knows everything about consequences. She watched 6 men brutalize her dog, while I was forced to stand by and do nothing." They left the school together. As darkness fell that night, John sat at the kitchen table, lost in a sea of bills. Calculator pen. The numbers were cold, uncaring. For the vet, $340. Another $127 for Max's new antibiotics. Rent was looming due in 12 days. The truck repair impossible. The vehicle's title felt heavy in his hand. It had been paid off for 3 years. Worth maybe $200 if he was incredibly lucky. "Dad," Emily was standing in the doorway, her pajamas adorned with faded unicorns. "Why can't we just go to move to a different place?" John gazed down at his daughter. Only 10 years old, and already seeing how the world grinds down those who can't defend themselves, because fleeing teaches you that your self-respect is negotiable. He placed the title on the table. "And in this family, it will never be." "But no one is hearing you." "Then I will force them to listen." Saturday dawned with a chill, the earliest whisper of autumn seeping into the warmth of September. John rose at 5, brewed coffee, and unearthed cardboard from the garage. With a black marker and a steady hand, he wrote, "Justice for Max K-9 veteran assaulted 923. From the doorway, Emily observed him as he meticulously worked. "Dad, what is it you're doing?" "What I should have done all along, speaking the truth." He went to his truck, setting the for sale sign inside the window. Then he lifted the cardboard sign, feeling its weight. Max trailed him down the porch stairs, his movements more deliberate now, his bandages still peeking from beneath his thin fur. But his head remained upright, forever proud. Together they made their way to the courthouse. 7 o'clock on a Saturday morning. The square was deserted save for the pigeons and a flicker of possibility. John took his place on the lowest step. Max settled beside him. The first passerby emerged at 7:30. It was a woman dressed in running gear, her ponytail swaying. She slowed her pace as she noticed them. Her eyes scanned the sign, then fell upon Max's exposed, scarred skin. Her name was Amanda, 52, a high school teacher, a mom of 3 children. Tears filled her eyes. She remained silent, simply nodding at John before she moved on. John held his ground. The sun climbed steadily higher. His leg throbbed with pain. Max pressed against him a warm and trusting weight. This was only day 1. By midday, 17 people had passed by. 16 looked away, but one person had nodded, and that one was enough to be a start. John shifted his weight, adjusting his grasp on the sign. Across the street, a dark pickup truck approached the curb and stopped its engine humming. John Brennan's sunglasses hid his eyes, his phone a silent witness. For 8 days, the courthouse steps had been his entire world. His cardboard sign stated his case. Max stood a faithful sentinel beside him. The October sun offered a faint, fleeting warmth now. John's thermos was filled with bitter, lukewarm coffee from the gas station. By day 5, the hunger pains had finally fallen silent. He'd learned long ago how to silence the ache of an empty stomach. Just across the street, a different life was unfolding. Millie's diner buzzed a world away with its Sunday morning crowd. Families in their finest retirees trading stories over coffee. John watched through the glass, an outsider looking in. Then, at 11:30, a small bell over the diner's door chimed softly. Dolores appeared, holding a thermos and a simple paper bag. 58 years old, a waitress for 3 decades with a voice weathered by life. She crossed the street with a purpose that defied hesitation, her worn orthopedic shoes squeaking against the hot asphalt. "You look like you could use this," she said, setting the thermos beside him. A cloud of steam bloomed as she twisted the cap. It was real coffee, dark and rich. The aroma alone was a treasure compared to his usual fare. The paper bag rustled as she set it down. Inside was a roast beef sandwich on sourdough with chips and a pickle. John's mouth flooded a betrayal by his own body. "I can't pay for this." "I didn't ask you to." Dolores knelt down, her knees cracking with the deliberate effort, and reached a gentle hand toward Max. He sniffed it cautiously before leaning into her practiced, soothing scratch behind his ears. She understood animals. "My son, he was a Marine," she said quietly, her gaze on Max's scars. "He came back changed. You have his eyes." John was speechless, afraid his own voice would shatter. "Some wars follow you home," she murmured, rising slowly to her feet. Her joints groaned in protest. "If you need more, you let me know. I mean it." She turned and walked away before John could find words. He watched through the window as she returned to her counter, pouring coffee for someone as if nothing remarkable had just occurred, as if her simple act of kindness hadn't just pierced the armor around his heart. Tucked in the sandwich was an extra slice of turkey for Max. John tore it into pieces, feeding his old friend who chewed with the slow care of a dog, well acquainted with pain. But Max's tail thumped a slow, steady, grateful rhythm on the concrete. And from inside the diner, unseen eyes were watching. Some turned away, but others couldn't look away. Day 10 brought a sharp October wind that cut to the bone. John now knew to dress in layers and to bring a thick blanket for Max. The courthouse steps had become as familiar as his own front porch. The sound arrived first, the slow squeak of protesting wheels, a sound of metal on metal, rhythmic, unwavering. Harold Hal Patterson was rolling up the ramp in his wheelchair. A Vietnam veteran cap was perched on his silver hair. 72 years old, he was missing both legs below the knee. A purple heart and bronze star were pinned to his jacket. He smelled of Old Spice and cigarettes, his eyes fixed on the sign for a full minute before he spoke. "Canine, huh?" His voice was pure gravel, forged in 1,000 shouted commands. "Which unit were you with, JSOC?" John answered quietly. Hal's eyebrows lifted. Joint Special Operations doesn't just hand over their dogs to civilians. Unless... His eyes narrowed. He was reassessing the man before him. "You were Delta." John offered no confirmation, but he didn't deny it either. Some things never need to be said aloud. Hal sparked a cigarette, offering one to John, who simply shook his head. "I know a guy," Hal said, the smoke curling from his lips. "An investigative reporter for the Austin Chronicle. Marcus Webb. He has a real fire for stories about vets getting a raw deal from the system." He carefully retrieved a business card from his wallet and handed it to John. Its edges were soft, as if Hal had carried it waiting for this very purpose. "He might not take the story," Hal went on, "but he will hear you out, and that's a hell of a lot more than most are willing to do." John slipped the precious card into his pocket. "Thank you. Don't go thanking me yet." Hal's wheelchair groaned as he maneuvered himself beside the steps, staring out at the square like a general mapping out his next move. Just don't you dare give up this fight. We didn't make it back from our wars just to watch these punks win theirs. They sat in a profound silence for 20 minutes. 2 old soldiers, 1 faithful dog, as the world rushed on around them while they held their ground. When Hal finally rolled away, Max watched him go, ears pricked, head tilted. It was a silent recognition between 2 warriors, both of whom had left pieces of themselves behind for something much larger. John stared down at the business card. It was plain white. Marcus Webb, Senior Investigator. He didn't make the call. Not yet. But he held on to that small piece of hope. Day 16 arrived, and with it came Emily, racing up the courthouse steps after school, her backpack clattering with keychains. Her face was flushed, her eyes holding a spark John hadn't seen in far too long, a spark of fierce hope. "Dad, you have to look." She dumped the contents of her bag onto the stone step. 23 handmade cards spilled out a rainbow of construction paper glitter, and heartfelt crayon messages declaring, "Get well soon, Max," and "We love you, Max. You are our hero." "Mrs. Chen let us make them during class," Emily explained, her voice breathless with excitement. "She even signed one. So did Tommy and Sarah and Miguel. Their parents don't even know, but they wanted to do it." A tightness formed in John's throat as he read every single one. The childish script, the stick-figure dogs, the hearts and stars, and one incredibly ambitious drawing of Max proudly wearing a hero's cape. Emily meticulously taped them to the courthouse wall, creating a vibrant shrine of childhood loyalty. Max just watched his tail wagging gently, his tongue lolling in what looked so much like a smile. "Dad, some kids at school say you're weird," Emily said quietly, her focus still on the cards. "They say we should just give up." She paused, then looked right at him. "Am I weird too?" John carefully set down his sign and knelt, ignoring the sharp protest from his leg, to meet her gaze. "Honey, weird is just another word for different, and being different is the only way things ever truly change." He gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "You're not weird, you're courageous." That night, Max drifted to sleep encircled by crayon masterpieces. Emily fell asleep right on the floor beside him, her small hand resting on his paw. John gently covered her with a blanket, then stood by the window, a silent guardian watching the darkened street. Something was waiting on their porch, a 40-pound bag of dog food, the premium kind. No note, no name left behind. John inspected it for tampering, an old reflex from a different war. It was clean, perfectly safe, an anonymous gift. He carried it inside and poured a mound into Max's bowl. The clatter of kibble against metal was like music. Outside headlights cut through the darkness. Cody's truck. The 4th time this week it had slowed as it passed. But tonight was different. A second vehicle crept behind it, a dark sedan with government plates. Day 17 dawned with a fragile, unexpected sunshine and the sharp click of a camera shutter. John glanced up from his solemn vigil to see a man in his 40s crouched low beside Max. A digital camera was raised. His jeans were worn thin at the knees, a press badge was clipped to his belt, and a leather messenger bag was slung across him like armor. "John Carter," the man said, lowering his camera. "Marcus Webb from the Austin Chronicle. Hal Patterson sent me." Webb knelt down to Max, his journalistic instinct knowing precisely where the soul of the story was. He extended a hand slowly, allowing Max to approve. He read the dog's posture with a quiet empathy born from knowing trauma. Max simply tilted his head, a flicker of curiosity. The dog allowed the gentle contact. "May I hear your story?" Webb retrieved a small recorder, placing it on the concrete step that separated them. John began, his voice steady, recounting it all. No flourishes, only the brutal facts. The evening walk, the sudden ambush. The shearing, the wounds, the sheriff's dismissiveness. His tone was flat, devoid of emotion, like a soldier delivering a mission report. Yet his hand never once left Max's fur. Webb jotted down notes requesting the screenshots. He studied them with the sharp focus of a man whose entire career was unearthing truths others buried deep. And then he saw the tattoo. Max's coat was returning in uneven patches, but the faded numbers remained starkly visible on his shoulder. Faint ink stood out against the raw pink scar tissue. "Hold on." Webb snatched his phone, his fingers blurring across the screen. K94721. That's a military designation? He tapped into a database using contacts John didn't dare question. The color vanished from Webb's face. "John, do you have any idea who this dog truly is?" "He's just Max, my dog." "No." Webb rotated the phone. An archived news story 10 years old. Embassy bombing hero. K9 survives, saves senator's life. The picture revealed a younger Max in a gleaming tactical vest poised beside soldiers before the American embassy in Kabul. He looked alert, proud, unbroken. Max was on the rapid response team during the 2015 embassy bombing. Webb spoke softly. He located a secondary device saving 47 lives, including Senator Thomas Richards, now Governor Richards. John's hand froze on Max's head. The official record says he was retired with full honors. But Webb kept scrolling down. Transferred to private care. Medical retirement for PTSD and severe physical injuries. "That was me," John said, his voice cracking. "Different mission a year later. He saved my life when an extraction went sideways. When I was medically retired." "Retiring." I requested him. No one gave a damn about a broken dog and a broken soldier. Webb's journalistic mask fell away, replaced by something profoundly human. "This is so much bigger than local corruption. John, this is a decorated war hero being brutalized by the very people he once protected." He documented everything. Max's deep scars, the sign John's tired face, the crayon cards still clinging to the courthouse wall. "Give me 1 week," Webb said as he packed his gear. "I'm making some calls. To the governor's office, state investigators, the national networks." "I don't want attention," John stated flatly. "I want accountability." Webb replied, "Sometimes you need one to get the other." Webb paused at the last step. "You're doing the right thing. Keep fighting." As Webb drove off, the black sedan from 3 days ago reappeared. This time it parked. Day 20 arrived like a fragile gift on the crisp October air. A golden sun and an energy in Max that John hadn't witnessed in weeks. The antibiotics were finally winning. The infection was clearing. Max devoured his entire breakfast, licked the bowl clean, and then looked at John with eyes that pleaded, "Outside." "Please, Dad, can we take him to the park?" Emily begged, already slipping on her sneakers. "Please," John hesitated. The park meant being seen, it meant facing risk, but Max's tail thumped with hope. "Yeah," John breathed. "Let's go." The walk was a revelation. Max trotted, he didn't run, but he moved with a ghost of his old, confident gait. His head was up his nose, working, reclaiming a world he'd been robbed of. The park was awash in the gold of October leaves, alive with families basking in the weekend warmth, the sound of happy children mixing with the creak of rusty swing sets. Emily found an abandoned tennis ball. "Can I?" John just nodded. She tossed it a short ways, maybe 20 feet. Max watched it sail, a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. Then something ancient awakened. He ran, snagged the ball, and brought it back. Emily squealed with pure joy. John's eyes began to burn. He refused to let the tears fall. But it was a close call. "Good boy, Max, good boy." They played for 20 minutes, Max's tongue lolling. His breathing was heavy, but it was the sound of bliss. The patchy fur, the scars, the outline of his bones, none of it mattered. For this one moment, he was just a dog, happy, adored, and whole again. A little boy toddled toward them, maybe 5 years old, cheeks sticky with popsicle. "Doggy," his mother reached to pull him back, her face a mask of uncertainty. "It's okay," John said softly. "He's gentle." Max sat without being told, allowing the boy's small hands to pat his head, pull his ears, and giggle at the damp nose sniffing his face. The mother finally met John's gaze. In her mid-30s, her eyes were weary but kind. "I saw you," she whispered. John waited at the courthouse. "I'm so sorry for everything that happened." She said nothing more. Nothing else was needed, but her gaze never faltered. When they could finally leave, Emily was lying in the grass with Max right beside her, his head resting gently on her stomach. John sat nearby, his legs stretched out, watching the clouds drift slowly overhead. "Dad, he's going to be all right, isn't he?" It was the question every parent fears when you must choose between a difficult truth and a fragile hope. "I don't know, sweetheart." John's hand found hers. "But he is okay today, and that has to be enough." For 20 perfect minutes, they watched the sky together. The world felt simple. Day 23 began long before the dawn. John arrived at his familiar post at 6:45 in the morning. The October cold bit through his jacket. His breath hung in the air. Someone had left a folding chair, a camping-style one. Its cushioned seat was still in good condition. A note was tucked into the fabric, "For the vigil." A friend. John unfolded it. He sat for the first time in 23 days. His legs cried out in relief. Max curled at his feet with a sigh of deep contentment. At 7:30, Dolores crossed the street with coffee. This was their routine. 8 o'clock. Hal drove past, nodded his silent support, and kept moving. They were brothers in arms. At 8:15, Amanda, the teacher who'd given the first nod, stopped setting a bouquet of wildflowers beside his sign. "For Max." She smiled. A true, genuine smile. She left without a word, not waiting for his thanks. By 9 o'clock, 3 bouquets surrounded them, along with 2 stuffed animals, a teddy bear and a dog. Both were well worn from a child's love next to a hand-drawn picture of Max with wings. John felt a shift deep in his bones. The tide was turning. He didn't understand how he knew, but the certainty was absolute. Across the street, a man in a suit 50s with an official bearing emerged from the black sedan that had been watching for days. He crossed the square deliberately, stopping directly in front of John. "Mr. Carter, my name is Agent Morrison." "FBI." He opened his badge. "We need to talk about your dog." Behind him, 3 more official vehicles pulled to the curb. Not local police. These were federal agents. Agent Morrison didn't sit. He simply stood there watching. He studied Max with the cold assessment of someone trained to perceive what others miss. "The tattoo on your dog matches a K9 reported as retired through the proper channels 10 years ago," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "But certain parties are demanding verification that this is in fact the same animal. There will be consequences if it is." "It's him," John stated, his voice unwavering. "We'll need his veterinary records. The DNA confirmation, if at all possible." Morrison then handed John a business card. "Governor Richard's office has started making inquiries. This entire situation must be documented perfectly." He vanished as quickly as he had appeared. John's gaze fell from the card to Max, who had slept undisturbed through the whole exchange. Some wars, it seemed, truly never came to an end. Day 24 delivered Marcus Webb's story. John knew nothing until Hal rolled up with a printed copy, still warm from the library's printer. It was front-page regional section right above the fold. "War hero K9 attacked in small town. Owner seeks justice against sheriff's son." The photograph was breathtakingly perfect. Max sitting beside the courthouse sign, his scars visible, but his dignity completely intact. John's weathered profile, his hand resting on Max's head, the crayon card seen behind them, like testimony from those too young to lie. "Webb quoted you," Hal said, "and he didn't hold anything back." John read his own words. "I'm not asking for revenge, just an acknowledgement that what happened was wrong." The sheriff's response. "No comment at this time." But the article laid out everything else. The damning live stream evidenced the detailed veterinary reports, Max's decorated military history, and the systematic refusal of local authorities to investigate. By noon, John's old flip phone showed 14 missed calls. He didn't answer a single one. By evening, the town's Facebook groups had erupted. John didn't have Facebook, but Emily showed him on a library computer after school. Half the comments were, "Finally someone is standing up to Brennan." The other half, "He's making our town look awful. Why can't he just move on?" Day 25. Both front tires on John's truck were slashed. The cuts were clean. Professional. Day 26. Spray paint on his porch. A single word in red letters, "Liar." Day 27. Emily was followed home from school by Cody's menacing truck, crawling just 20 feet behind her until she finally reached their yard. John called the principal, got voicemail, and left a message that went unreturned. He refused to stop the vigil, but he started bringing Emily with him. It was simply safer to keep her close. Day 28, 3 a.m. John was ripped from sleep by a horrifying sound. Max was in the hallway, his legs trembling as a dark, blood-flecked pool spread across the hardwood. No, this can't be happening!" In a heartbeat, John was on the floor beside him, his hands hovering, terrified to make contact, yet more terrified not to. "Emily, wake up, call Doc Stevens." Max's legs finally gave way. He crumpled to his side with a soft, unending whimper, a sound John had never heard before. Emily appeared, saw Max, and her face went ghost white. Is he dying?" "No." John's voice was eerily calm. "Not today. Call the doctor now." Doc Stevens arrived at 4 Hudzero, clad in flannel pajamas with a jacket thrown over them. His examination was gentle, yet meticulously thorough. Fingers pressing, listening, checking Max's pupils. "The cancer is spreading much faster than I anticipated," he said quietly. "The stress, the attack, this difficult recovery, all of it. It's accelerated the progression." He prepared a syringe. "This will help with the pain." But John, the heavy silence said everything. "You need to consider his quality of life. He's suffering." Emily's voice cracked. "Dad, please, you can't let him go." Max's eyes found John's. They were cloudy cataracts forming, but they were still trusting. Still waiting for John to make it okay. "Doc, give him the strongest pain medication you have." John's hand settled firmly on Max's chest, feeling the chaotic heartbeat beneath ribs that were now far too prominent. "We're not done fighting this yet." The injection worked with merciful speed. Max's breathing eased his tense body, relaxing into a painless welcome haze. He rested his head in John's lap and finally slept. Days 28 and 29 blurred into one long, somber vigil. John stayed home from the courthouse, letting Max sleep on the couch completely against the rules. But the rules meant nothing anymore. They took shifts just watching him breathe. Emily read aloud from Where the Red Fern Grows, sobbing through the parts about Old Dan and Little Anne. John just sat, his hand resting on Max's side, counting every single rise and fall of his chest. On the night of day 29, John stood on the porch, utterly alone. Emily was asleep inside, and Max was resting, lost in the morphine that made his world soft and bearable. He pulled out his phone. Marcus Webb's name glowed on his screen. His thumb trembled over the call icon. He nearly pressed it, nearly whispered, "I'm finished. This isn't worth all the pain." And then from inside the house, a bark. It was faint, but it was there. A call to fight. John rushed back inside. Max stood by the door, pleading to be let out. It was the simple dignity of a loyal dog who had held on rather than dishonor his home. John eased him down the steps, supporting his frail body, as Max took care of his business under the watchful stars. Then Max leaned heavily against John's leg. A quiet moment just for them. An old warrior and his old dog still standing together. "All right, buddy," John whispered into the darkness. "All right, we push forward." On day 30 at 1100 hours, John had finally succumbed to sleep in his chair. Emily was asleep in her room. Max was on his bed, medicated and finally at peace. A gate creaked. A low growl from Max tore John from his sleep, a clear warning. The sound of a sentinel who sensed danger even through a medicinal fog. 3 shadows moved in the backyard. Hooded sweatshirts, faces masked. One clutched a catch pole, the kind animal control used. They were here for Max. John didn't yell. He didn't give them a warning. Pure muscle memory took over. 20 years of Delta Force training ignited in 3 seconds of lethal movement. He swept the first man's legs out from under him. The figure crashed to the ground, the air exploding from his lungs. He disarmed the second, the pole clattering loudly across the concrete. The third one ran. John pinned the first intruder, tearing the mask from his face. It was Cody's friend, just 20 years old, paralyzed with terror. "We were just gonna scare you, man." Cody said leave. John's voice was Delta Force cold. A command, not a choice. "Now? And you tell Cody that if he ever threatens my family again, I will not be merciful." They scrambled away like roaches fleeing a sudden light. John's hand started to shake, for the first time in years. The adrenaline crash hit him hard. Max stood beside him, fur on end, protective to the last. Emily was at the window, her face a pale mask of fear. John realized then this was escalating, and he was done being the hunted. He called Marcus Webb. "I need you to get that article to the governor's office personally, and to every state investigator you know. John, are you certain?" "It's time this ended." He hung up the phone. Across the street, headlights ignited. The black sedan watching, always watching. 1,000 unwritten threats hung in the air. Day 31 arrived with a heavy, waiting silence. John held his vigil at the courthouse. 6:45 a.m. The October chill bit deep right through his jacket, his breath a white ghost in the pre-dawn gloom. Max leaned into his leg, heavier now, needing the comfort. The street was deserted, unsettlingly so. No Dolores crossing with her coffee. No Hal rolling by with his usual nod. Not a single flower left overnight. No stuffed toys, no hand-drawn pictures, only John Max, and a sign weathered by 23 days of relentless sun and rain. "Maybe they're right." John whispered words intended only for Max's ears. "Maybe it's time to stop." Max looked up, his eyes trusting even as a cloudiness crept in. "What am I doing? Boy, what are we really doing here?" The wind was silent. At 900 a.m., a black SUV pulled to the curb. Government plates, the Texas Rangers insignia on the door. John went rigid. A woman emerged in her 40s, professional suit, a badge on her belt. She approached with the steady confidence of a person who never had to prove her authority. "Mr. Carter, I am Lieutenant Sarah Hayes, Texas Rangers." She extended a hand. "I read the article. I need to hear your side of the story." John's throat went dry. "I've told it a dozen times. Tell it to me." Her voice was firm, but held no judgment. "For the record." Inside the coffee shop reeked of burnt espresso and bleach. Hayes led them to a booth in the very back, away from prying ears. She placed a digital recorder on the table between them and pressed record. "From the beginning, if you would." John recounted it all. The ambush, the sheriff's indifference, the constant threats, the attempted abduction. He kept his voice steady and factual, the way his training had conditioned him to deliver mission reports. Hayes took notes in a leather-bound notebook, her pen making a faint sound. "The abduction attempt, did you report it? To whom?" John met her gaze directly. "The sheriff." Hayes's face remained a perfect mask, but something hardened in her eyes, a recognition of a system that had failed. "Mr. Carter, you're not the first person to file a complaint against Sheriff Brennan's department." She closed her notebook with a firm snap. "But you are the first with actual evidence, a narrative the media simply cannot dismiss." She leaned in. "I am opening a formal investigation. It will require patience. We must build this case meticulously, but I give you my word we will pursue this. Ma'am, I couldn't care less about the sheriff." John's hand gently found Max's head beneath the table. "I just need my daughter to be safe, and I need people to understand what Max is. He is not just a dog. He is a soldier." Hayes watched Max sleeping peacefully now, his muzzle resting on John's boot, trusting enough to find peace in this strange place. "I understand." Her voice grew softer. My brother was a K-9 handler over in Iraq. He would have done the very same thing you're doing." A silence fell heavy with unspoken grief. He didn't make it back. John simply nodded, a profound understanding passing between two people who had both lost a part of themselves to war. Hayes gathered her belongings. "I'm going to need you to halt the vigil for several days. Let us do our work. Stay home. Keep Emily protected." "That feels like giving up." "No." Hayes rose to her feet. "That is trusting that the system might actually deliver justice this time." John wanted to object, wanted to refuse, but he was just so very tired. Utterly exhausted. "How much time grant me? 5 days. If you have not heard from me by then you can return to your courthouse steps." She passed him her card. "But I believe you will." 5 days felt like 5 years. Day 32, no word. Day 33, crushing silence. Day 34, still nothing. Day 35 arrived with the weight of a funeral. Max wouldn't eat and he barely drank. The morphine kept the pain under control. But John could see the truth beneath it all, a body beginning to shut down. A clock running out of time. Doc Stevens stopped by on the evening of day 34. He examined Max with the somber gentleness of a man about to deliver heartbreaking news. "John, I don't believe he has very long. Days he cleared his throat, maybe a week. What about the treatment?" "There is no treatment. Not anymore." The vet's eyes held a kind sadness. "The cancer has spread to his lungs now. His liver. It's everywhere." That night day, 8 o'clock in the evening, John sat in his living room, the TV having been turned off for hours. A static silence hung in the air. Emily hummed quietly from her room, trying to create a shield of sound for herself. Max lay on his bed, his breathing labored and harsh, even with the medication. Each breath in was a fight, each breath out was a small, fleeting triumph. Emily appeared in the doorway, her eyes red from crying. She thought John couldn't hear. "Daddy!" Her voice fractured. "If Max leaves us before they find those monsters, does that mean they won?" John was utterly speechless. The question hung between them, a tangible presence. He opened his arms. She ran to him, 10 years old, still small enough to fold into his embrace. For the first time since this nightmare began, since the attack, the vigil, the constant threats, all of it, John finally broke not with loud sobs, but with silent tears carving paths down his weary face as his daughter held him, and his dog fought for each breath. "I just don't know, sweetheart," he whispered into her hair. "I really don't know." And then, Max, with an effort that cost him everything he stood, walked to them on trembling legs, and laid his graying head on John's knee in a profound gesture. "I'm still right here. This isn't over yet." John's hand found Max's ear, stroking the soft fur. "Okay, buddy," he whispered. "Okay." Outside, a car door slammed shut. Footsteps on the porch. A knock. John checked the time. 8:47 p.m. Much too late for any visitors. He approached the door, looked through the peephole. Lieutenant Hayes stood on his porch, and against all odds, she was smiling. The phone rang at 7:15 a.m. John had been awake since 5, sitting in the dark kitchen, his eyes fixed on the clock, waiting for nothing, and yet for everything. Max slept in the living room, his morphine-heavy breathing audible right through the walls. The old rotary phone's ring cut through the heavy silence like a blade. John's hand trembled as he lifted the receiver. "Mr. Carter, it's Lieutenant Hayes." Her voice held a quality John hadn't heard in 36 agonizing days. Triumph. "We got them." The world tilted. "We arrested Cody Brennan and his 2 accomplices last night. They're facing multiple charges. Animal cruelty, assault, conspiracy, obstruction of justice. We recovered the deleted videos from Cody's phone. Full confessions from the others once they realized they were facing felony time." John's legs buckled. He collapsed heavily into a kitchen chair. "Sheriff Brennan has been placed on administrative leave, pending a full investigation into corruption. The DA is reviewing everything now. It's over. It's finally over." Hayes paused, then said, You did this. Mr. Carter, by refusing to back down by standing out there every day until someone who mattered was finally forced to look. John was speechless. He could only press the phone hard against his ear and breathe. And there's one more thing, Hayes continued. Governor Richards. He called my office himself. He wants to see Max tomorrow if you're open to it. A wave of disbelief washed over him. The governor, he never let it go. For 10 long years he's been searching for Max. As John set the phone down, the weight of the moment settled in. He just sat there in the kitchen watching as the sunrise painted the walls in hues of gold. Emily, still in her pajamas, appeared, and one look at his face told her everything. They got them. They got them, he confirmed, and she flew into his embrace. They held each other and wept a torrent of relief, of pure exhaustion. It was a victory so immense it felt impossible to contain. Then from the living room a faint but joyful bark echoed. Max understood. Day 37 dawned with the gentle warmth and golden light of September, the kind of light that made you believe anything was possible. John's front yard had been utterly transformed overnight. Someone, or maybe several someones, had mowed the lawn, pulled every last weed, and swept the porch clean. An anonymous act of kindness finally offered, now that it was safe to show compassion. At 2:00 p.m., a convoy of 3 black SUVs glided to a stop. The security detail emerged first. All business professional and efficient. They swept their eyes over the property, murmuring into their earpieces, giving silent nods. And then Governor Thomas Richards himself stepped out. 62 years old, with silver hair and kind eyes that held the weight of too many burdens. He was dressed in slacks and a button-down, not a suit. This wasn't a state visit. This was a pilgrimage. His eyes found Max on the porch, and he froze. His hand flew to his mouth. My God. He breathed the words, barely a whisper. It's really him. From his place on the old quilt, Max watched, tilting his head, puzzled by the sudden focus. He was too weary to rise, but his tail gave a slow, hesitant wag, a flicker of uncertain recognition deep within him. Richards moved forward as if he were approaching a sacred thing. Slowly, reverently, he knelt on the worn porch steps, his fine slacks sinking into the dust, oblivious to everything but the old dog before him. Hey, hero? His voice broke with emotion. Do you remember me? Max cautiously sniffed the outstretched hand. And then, something connected, a scent, the pitch of a voice, a memory unearthed from beneath 10 years of a different existence. His tail began to wag truly this time. He gave Richard's hand a single knowing lick. Tears streamed down the governor's face. John remained at a distance, giving them their moment, witnessing a reunion a decade in the making. Kibble 2015? Richard said, his gaze shifting to John, though one hand never left Max's side. I was a senator then on a diplomatic mission. A car bomb, a secondary device hidden inside the compound. Max found it 30 seconds before it was set to go off. He glanced back at Max, his fingers tracing the scarred fur with reverence. He gave the alert. We cleared the entire building. 47 souls lived because of him. I was one. Richards wiped at his eyes, unashamed of the tears. I went looking for him afterward. They informed me he was retired to a special facility. I pictured him living like a king somewhere safe and protected, honored, cherished. His gaze swept over John's humble house, the patchy lawn, the faded furniture seen through the screen door. You've been caring for him. He took care of us first, John stated softly. It was a different mission a year later. He pulled me out of a fatal extraction. When I took my medical retirement, I put in a request for him. Nobody blinked an eye at a broken dog and a broken soldier finding each other. Richard rose to his feet, extending his hand. I am going to make this right. Full medical care for Max, whatever he requires for the rest of his life. And for you and Emily, a scholarship fund. A VA benefits review housing assistance if you need it. John started to object his pride, demanding that he say no. This isn't charity, Richard said with conviction. It's paying a debt. Max earned this, and so did you. The media had gathered at a respectful distance, cameras, and reporters held back by security. Richards gestured for them to come forward. "Is this all right?" he asked John. "The world needs to see him to know what he really is." John nodded. They presented a metal Texas Medal of Valor, specially made for him. Richards knelt down again, placing it around Max's neck with the solemnity of a military honors ceremony. Cameras clicked and flashed, capturing the powerful moment for all of history. Max sat through the ordeal with patient dignity, as if he'd done this before because he had. Emily pressed her face into Max's fur, her quiet tears soaking into his weathered coat. "You are a hero, Max," she whispered. "Everybody knows it now." Max's tail thumped gently. He did not comprehend the medals or governors or cameras, but he understood his girl was happy. That was all that mattered. Day 39 brought a summons. John had not asked for a town gathering on the courthouse steps. The mayor had organized it. The very same mayor who was silent for 36 days. 200 people came. John lingered in the back with Emily and Max, uneasy, with the spotlight wanting to disappear. The mayor took the microphone, a squeal of feedback piercing the air. "We owe John Carter and Max an apology," his voice echoed across the square. "We failed them. We chose silence when we should have shown courage. We chose comfort over doing what was right, but today we choose differently." One by one, speakers stepped forward. "Dolores, John taught us that kindness needs no permission, that a single person standing alone can change the entire world. Hal from his wheelchair reminded us that all veterans, whether they have 4 legs or 2, deserve our respect. That service never truly ends when the uniform comes off." Then Amanda, the teacher. He showed our children what integrity truly looks like, what it means to stand for something even when it costs you everything. Then they called John's name. He hesitated, but Emily gave him a gentle push forward. He took the microphone as if it might bite him. "I didn't do any of this for recognition." His voice was raw, unaccustomed to the spotlight. "I did it because it was the right thing to do, and because Max, he never once gave up on me." His hand instinctively found the top of Max's head. "When I came back from overseas broken, he was there. When I believed I had nothing left to offer this world, he reminded me I could still be a father, that I could still matter." He glanced down at Max, the metal tag hanging from his neck, his eyes cloudy yet filled with a deep contentment. "So if there's any hero here today, it isn't me. It's him. It always has been." The square suddenly erupted in a wave of applause. A standing ovation. John was frozen, not knowing what to do with it all, just standing there overwhelmed as Max's tail thumped against his leg, fueled by the energy. Afterward, as they walked through the crowd, people began to reach out, not in a demanding way, but just to touch his shoulder, to nod, to whisper, "Thank you." For what John wasn't entirely sure, but he accepted it with a quiet grace. Day 42 brought one final hopeful gift. The veterinary oncology clinic in Austin was a world away from Doc Stevens' small-town practice. It was modern, sterile, with expensive-looking equipment gleaming beneath the stark fluorescent lights. Dr. Miranda Okoye was in her 40s, her Nigerian accent softened by 20 years in Texas. Her eyes had seen too many beloved animals pass, but they still held a fierce belief in fighting. She examined Max with precision. Bloodwork, CT scans, X-rays, the complete diagnostic arsenal. John and Emily sat waiting in a room where the walls were covered with photos of dogs, all of them healthy, dogs playing dogs that had survived this very fight. The room held both hope and heartbreak in equal measure. When Dr. Okoye stepped back into the room, John searched her face for answers. Doctors master the art of the stoic mask, but their eyes could never lie. "The cancer, it has spread," she said, her voice soft with compassion. "Lungs, liver, the lymph nodes. It's an aggressive stage 4.